In Matthew 24, we read that Jesus said, "Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then will appear in heaven the sign of the Son of Man, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place."
All right, guys, we've got ourselves a challenge here. What it sounds like Jesus is saying, we got all these signs, all these wonders, Son of Man appearing in the cloud. Sounds like Jesus is coming back is what's going on in this passage. But then he makes a statement in there that is so confusing. He said, all of these things are going to happen before this generation passes away. He's talking to his disciples. He's like, this is imminent. This is happening now. And of course, here we are about 2,000 years later.
Is Jesus a failed prophet?
Exactly. That's the real question. Is Jesus a false prophet? He's saying it was going to happen in this generation. So what exactly is
Last I checked,
on?
there are still stars in the sky.
Still stars hanging out in the sky. So this is a very challenging passage, and we are going to wrestle a bear today.
Welcome to Bears, Boys, Bible Study Fantastica. We're the boys. I'm Sean Walker.
Jason Allen.
Shan Taylor.
And we are going to deal with a bear of a text today. And our hope is that we can understand how to read the Bible better.
Absolutely.
Yep, we do this through what is called biblical hermeneutics. And if maybe this is our second episode, and so maybe that's only the second time in your entire life that you've even heard that term, hermeneutics. But it's very simply the principles that we need to understand the Bible. And so that's a big promise that you're making for us, Jason, that you're about to teach us a principle that is going to make sense of one of the most debated topics in biblical studies.
Very much debated. Yes, I have maybe the most debated. Just going big or going home here.
You are, yeah. I mean, I started with like children being mauled. And I feel like compared to this, that was not that much of a bear of a text.
This is most certainly one that people disagree on. You know, even the best of scholars in the entire world would come together and have slightly different views of how this could be explained or how this text should be laid out. I plan on laying out one of those views that I think, given the hermeneutical principles that we know, does work for this text.
All right, well, before we start wrestling with this bear, if I'm going to be honest, the only time I know if something is actually good or actually went well is feedback from my wife. She's the only person that gives me truly honest feedback.
Yeah.
And so my question to you is, did your wives watch or listen to the first episode, and what was their feedback?
My wife has not watched the first episode of the podcast. She's kind of like, yeah, I listened to you plenty, buddy. You know.
Which is valid.
In fact, one of the things today, she commented as I walked out the house, her big critique was, why are you wearing that shirt? It's so busy. Now this is like Florida Baptist Convention gear here.
Yeah.
So like I'm totally representing, but she was like, my eyes hurt looking at your shirt.
Well, I think this is a good opportunity for me to say that I did ask Brian Knoll, which is our Florida Baptist rep in this area, to promote our show. And he said, first episode was pretty good. Let's see. We'll see. That's basically what his answer was. Was like,
that's great.
Give me a couple more. And so I feel like if this doesn't convince him to promote our show that Jason is wearing a Florida Baptist shirt,
come on, man.
then
Come on.
nothing will.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's great.
My wife did not listen.
No, not at all.
No. Same thing.
So I'm really curious as to what your wife actually had to say. That's fascinating.
Well, I think it helped that on the podcast is my wife's cousin.
That's true.
This we're revealing inside information here.
Yeah. Favorite cousin, to be exact.
Sean is Meg's favorite cousin.
Naturally.
Yeah, there's no other cousins here to argue that. So her feedback was very honest. She listened to about half of it, okay? And she said, this is too long. But keep in mind, she was trying to manage our household at the same time. So
Yeah.
children were running around like crazy. She doesn't have a commute, like a 20-minute commute where she could listen to it over a week. It would only be, her only opportunity would be while managing children.
Exactly.
Her second piece of feedback was, your water bottle is too big. This is the water bottle I used in the first episode, and she said it is distractingly large. Every time you pick that up and drink out of it, all I can think about is, why is your water bottle so enormous?
I think it's captivating. Yeah, I think it gets people in. You know?
Yeah, there you go.
She provided an alternate water bottle for me for this episode, which is a reasonably sized water bottle.
That looks great, man.
So hopefully it will be less distracting. Her last critique comment is not surprising. In the first episode, we were figuring things out on the fly, and the table that we used, we needed to cover it with a rug.
With a rug, yeah.
Yeah. But she said that woven rug looks like this is going to be a podcast about knitting. Like you guys are all sitting in a knitting circle making the rug as you talk about the rug.
Are you telling me this is not a podcast about knitting? Because I'm in the wrong place. If that's
I mean, it's a great idea. You combine knitting and
work some
hermeneutics.
knitting. Yeah, I mean, that'd be great.
It'd be original.
That would be.
So I do think we will today. We've addressed two of her concerns. I don't think it's going to be shorter. If I had to guess, knowing that we're about to cover basically an entire chapter on eschatology, I'm just guessing.
It's probably not going to be short.
Okay. Sorry, Meg.
Yeah, sorry, Meg. All right, so let's dive into the passage. Let's go ahead and kind of get rolling. Let me give you some kind of preliminary. There's a couple of ways to look at this type of passage. Obviously, this is often viewed in light of eschatology. Basically, what that is just the study of the end of times, basically. And there's a couple of ways to look at this particular chapter. A lot of the content, a good portion of people view it as all futuristic. Like everything in this chapter is related to the end of times, okay? But then the other main view is that a good portion of this passage is related to events that happen during the time right after Christ and before the destruction of the Jewish temple, which happened in 70 AD, and kind of related to that time frame. All right, so it's good to kind of understand that there are different people that view this in different ways, and I'm going to go through and kind of share why I view it in the particular way, and as we walk through the passage, you'll kind of see kind of why. I kind of hold to most of this passage being the here and now is called the preterist view. I view most of this passage in that way, and it really is because of what Jesus said there at the end, that all this stuff is going to happen before this generation passes away. I think that's a really big statement to try to get around if you're going to hold to a futurist view on this particular chapter. So let's kind of walk through the passage, look at some of the, I've got one main hermeneutics principle. We are definitely going to use more than one in this passage, but kind of one main one that I kind of want to hang our hats on. So if you look at these first three verses, it gives us kind of the reason for the whole discourse. The disciples and Jesus, they're leaving the temple area. Jesus just drops this major bomb on them. He's like, hey, there's going to be a day where everything you see is going to be wiped out. Like no stone's going to be left on the other. And as we kind of look at the passage, he throws that out there in those first three verses. And that is wild and crazy for the disciples to hear. I mean, this is big, big news. And I want to stop here and consider how incredibly huge this is. You know, if we see a building that gets destroyed, we're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, no big deal. But for Jews, the temple was much more than just a building, right? It was literally where the presence of God dwelt with his people. And so for the temple to be up meant that God was with them in the Holy of Holies. His presence was with them. It was the symbol of they prayed towards the temple. Like it was all encompassing. The whole concept was God's presence with his people. And so for Jesus to say something like, yeah, this temple is going to be destroyed. What is the first thing that comes in the mind of a Jewish, these young Jewish guys who are his disciples? They're like, holy cow, that's like the presence of God with his people. And so we see the shock in the questions that they ask Jesus. And they finally get out to where, they can approach Jesus about it. And they ask him a couple of questions. They said, when will this happen? like when is this taking place? Like, are we talking like, like next year? Are we talking like when is this gonna happen? And then the other one, and I love how they assume that all these things should go together. They said, when are these things gonna happen? And then what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? So what's in their minds? They're like, well, if the temple's getting destroyed, then clearly the world is coming to an end.
Yeah.
Like clearly everything, there's got to be something new.
There's no other option in their minds.
Yeah, there's got to be some different age, something that's going on here that's not like things are now. Now, here comes the overall hermeneutics principle that I want to kind of focus in on today, because there's a couple of words, there's a couple of Greek words in those two questions that they ask that really guide the rest of this chapter that I think are really important. And so the larger heading of our hermeneutics principle today is the language of the text. With that particular heading, the language of the text, here's the principle that I kind of want to lay out, is how the Bible uses individual words often has a major impact on the meaning of a text. All right, how the Bible uses individual words often has a major impact on the meaning of the text. So for starters, when you're reading the passage, one of the things we want to make sure of is to pay attention to portions of text that might be a question and answer situation. That's what's happening here. This whole chapter is a big question and answer situation. And in this case, we actually have more than one question that they're asking. When is the temple going to be destroyed? What is the sign of your coming? And then of the end of the age as well. Like all of those are different parts of what they're putting together as a whole. And Jesus is going to kind of take those things apart and answer them maybe in a slightly different way than what they would have originally thought. So we're going to let Jesus speak to that here in just a second. But getting this part is major, because there's a lot of people that have a futurist view kind of ignore the fact that Jesus is answering a question that is one that's kind of right in front of their faces, like, when's the temple going to be destroyed? Well,
Sure.
We know through history that the temple was destroyed a couple of years later. It wasn't a few decades later, and that was that, and we haven't had a temple since then,
Right.
kind of a deal. And so their initial question was, when is that going to happen? And then they go into those other questions that, that we kind of look at as seemingly far off. But if you look at this whole chapter and you say, well, everything's about the end of times, well, then Jesus actually isn't answering one of their key questions. Jesus most certainly doesn't leave the first question unanswered. In fact, I'm going to submit to us today that a large part of this chapter, Jesus is actually answering the first question rather than the second two.
So you're saying that someone who reads Jesus's answer as entirely about a future eschatological moment, as opposed to about the destruction of the temple, is missing the very clear questions that the disciples ask at the beginning of this text, which is, when will these things happen? And then a second question, what will the sign of your coming be in the end of the age?
Yeah.
And their assumption was that those two things are the same moment, but Jesus' answer is
not so much.
Not that.
Yeah, not so much. So the other important way that this passage uses words here is related to the meaning of a couple of words. That we have a big problem in reading the Bible in English is that it was written in mostly, the New Testament at least, was written mostly in Greek, and the Old Testament mostly in Hebrew. And anybody who's done any translation, even between modern languages, know that it's sometimes hard to get an exact word to match the full meaning of what you're trying to say, in another language. Kind of my, the running example that I like to use of that is we are all present here today, right? And we are going to present this podcast. And if y'all are really good for Christmas, I will get you a present. All right. So all of those are spelled the same. That's the exact same word, present, but they have vastly different meanings, right? And so we've got to look then at the Greek, at the range of meanings, and we've got to understand what exactly was being said. What is not just what was the word, but, when I see a word, I have maybe a certain thought behind it of what it should look like. But did they have that same thought behind that word? Is there a little more to it than that? And so,
sure, but I do just want to point out briefly that we do have it recorded on a physical file that you just promised to get us Christmas presents.
Yeah.
So
is that an eschatological promise? Like when
will these things happen?
When will these things take place?
Yeah, that's our question to you. When will these things take place?
It might be
he said at Christmas
50 years from now. Who knows?
Man.
Oh man, I am
That's less
definitely
exciting.
becoming
Hey,
a preterist through this.
I'll get you guys a Christmas present. All right.
I mean, if you don't, we can call it out very clearly. We have the promise recorded.
I'll even wear a Santa hat for that month's episode. That'll
Let's
be
Let's
great.
go.
I'll bring a little sack and hand out toys. That'll be fantastic.
I'm so excited.
I'm pumped myself. It's going to be great. I actually have a Christmas suit. Do you guys have a Christmas suit? Do y'all have anything crazy?
I have a birthday suit. Don't have a Christmas suit.
We don't want to see that. This is PG, bro. Like, so I'll have to wear my Christmas suit and bring presents. That'll be fantastic.
I will not be wearing my birthday suit, just to be clear.
Oh man, that's wonderful. All right, so getting back on track here. A couple of tools I want to point out at this point, because I think it's really important. We want to teach you guys as well how you can do some of this study on your own. We're not just kind of handing out information, that we learned, just saying, hey, here's the info. We want you to be able to dig and to understand too. And so sometimes doing a word study on a word in the Bible that you may not fully understand exactly what it's saying is really, really important. And, if you're a pastor, you might use some tools, a couple of tools. One of those is an interlinear Bible. Basically, all that is it's got the English on one side and the Greek or the Hebrew on the other side, and you can look and say, okay, what Greek word is being used, when I'm reading this passage in English, and then I can take that Greek word and I can look it up in what is called a lexicon. All right, which is basically just a Greek dictionary or a Hebrew dictionary, is all it is. And I can look up that word and I can see the range of meaning of that word. And I can then take that and look at the context and see exactly what's going on. So those are the kind of tools that we might use as pastors. There are some, if you're more beginner and just kind of checking it out, there's some great tools. Man, these days you can almost find anything online. There's a tool called a concordance, which gives you kind of the English word and then gives you the Greek kind of meaning behind it. Strong's concordance is a lot of people use. There's actually that concordance is embedded in the text online on BibleHub.com. So that's a great little resource. Of course, there's other programs you can buy, Logos and Accordance and all.
A good free one is Blue Letter Bible.
Blue Letter Bible, yeah.
That one you can just click on the word and it'll show you the Greek word that is in reference to the English word, and it's totally free.
Yeah, and those are super accessible, really to anybody. And so, I mean, most certainly as pastors, we would encourage you to, do some of that digging in. There are some words that get a little more interesting. You don't want to just say, oh, this is one of the meanings of this word. I'm just going to use it because it's my favorite one. Well, there's other considerations, but it is good to look at kind of what some of that range of meaning could be, and could be very helpful. So back to our text. One of the big words here is the word coming. When is the sign of your coming? All right. That is an important word because we're going to see that a couple more times throughout this text. And there's going to be a lot of times that we actually don't see this word throughout the text because it's not talking about that particular coming. All right. So the word in the Greek is parousia, and it means presence or nearness or arrival. It's a technical term. It's used to describe a visit from a king. Like if you had a king coming and entering your town and visiting, he's coming to visit you and come to see you, that type of a deal. And so this is the idea, what they're thinking in their heads, that Jesus is coming as king, like he's coming to visit with them. He's gonna be with them, kind of.
So is that term more limited to an official coming? It wouldn't be your friend coming from next door. It would be somebody who's a big deal.
It would be somebody who was important typically. Yeah, absolutely. But it gives you that sense of presence more than anything else. Like he's actually here. And obviously his relation to Christ, we're talking about his second coming. We're talking about the time that he comes and rules and reigns, so to speak. The other word that's really important here, and it doesn't seem like it, but is actually the word end in the passage, okay? I think when we think of an end, we think of like a termination, like, oh, it's no longer there, kind of a thing. But actually this word in the Greek is the word syntelia, and the definition is more about completion. It's more about like the consummate, like you're pulling all the pieces together and now you have a finished, completed work. That seems like a small little difference, but it actually makes a lot of difference in this passage here.
And so you're saying for the hermeneutical principle is that because Jesus' answer is directly to these questions, and those are the key words in the questions, then obviously it gives you a lot of light into what he is saying if you understand those key words
Yeah. And what he's not saying.
more in depthly.
Yeah.
So what does coming mean? That is necessary in order to understand his answer. What does the end mean? That is necessary in order to understand his answer.
Yeah,
And to
absolutely.
read those surface level leads to a lot of potentially strange
Could be.
understandings of his answer.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's one more word in this question. What is a sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Age is a really important one because we're going to see that a couple of times throughout the passage. One of the translations, I think King James and a few other, a couple of the earlier translations actually say the end of the world. So immediately with that translation, you're thinking, oh, okay, well, this is it. It's all coming to a close. But the actual meaning there in the Greek is the word aeon, and it means a span of time. Characterized by a specific way of living. So an age, like you might say the age of the dinosaur, the age of, what was it, steel, bronze age or whatever.
Yeah.
Age of Ultron.
The age of Ultron.
Avengers movie.
Thank you for that. That was fantastic. A lovely breaking of my train of thought. That's fantastic. I really appreciate it. But it's more rather than, okay, well, this is the end of the world. This is the end of the age, all right? And I think that's really critical, and you'll see why here in a moment. And so these disciples' concept of a Messiah, I want to remind us from historical context, was one in which a Messiah would come, inaugurate a kingdom on earth, and would rule, all right? That was right now, Jesus is speaking, to a group of people who thinks this way. Now we don't. We're a little past the gospel. We have the gospel, and in this question, I think it would be an error to assume they have in mind the actual end of the world. They have in mind a change of guard, so to speak. The things are going to be different. The Messiah is going to come and rule. They're not thinking the end of the world. They're thinking the end of an age. And I think that's the proper way to understand their question that they're asking Jesus here. And so the end of one age, and then of course the start of a new one. That would be kind of how that should work. Now we know that the first coming of Christ, his death, his burial, his resurrection, his ascension, and the starting of the church was indeed a start of a whole new era, a whole new way of things. Jesus said, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Like it's right here, like it's going down, And so the final piece of that puzzle of this change of age, and I think we're going to see it here, is the destruction of the temple. And, obviously the death, burial, and resurrection of Christ, that obviously, the ascension and all of those things. And then you see the coming of the Holy Spirit. But there's still this hanging on of the previous way of things. The Jews are still tethered to the temple. The temple being destroyed is kind of the last holdout of this former age where the law and the prophets and all these things, and now we're coming into an age where the gospel and the church and the power of God coming through the Holy Spirit and all this kind of thing. So it really is a big changing of the guard. So in review, before we get too far, I want to make sure we're all on the same page and we're all kind of heading in the right direction. The disciples were asking a couple of questions. When is the temple going to be destroyed? Because that's what Jesus had told them it was going to be. And then what will be the sign of your coming, your kingly visit, your presence, and the end of the age, the era of time when things are going to dramatically change, where Jesus is going to rule, all of these types of things. All right. So I want us to walk through the rest of this passage and see how Jesus answers that. And it's fascinating to see his answer. Since you have the Bible, I'm just going to make you read each time we kind of walk through a passage. So read us verses 4-8, if you could.
Jesus answered them, "See that no one leads you astray, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray. And you will hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines and earthquakes in various places. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains."
Okay, so this is Jesus' first part of answering this question. And I read this through the lens. I grew up in a small rural church, and I'm sure much like you guys during the 90s, 80s and 90s, dispensationalist, kind of movement, and that's no hit. We have plenty of people on our staff or at our church that are dispensationalists. But one of the things you get from that is like every little thing like this, you're like, oh, end of times, like there's a war. You see a war on the news, and you're like, this is it.
Right.
Get ready. Rapture practice. Let's do this. I literally had a camp pastor one time. We did rapture practice at camp. So I don't even know
what are you practicing?
We just kind of like
folding your clothes.
It was
getting
just,
in your birthday suit.
I mean, it was like, yeah, oh God. But I mean, like, so my disposition towards passages like this is like, oh, okay, this is definitely about the end of times. Wars and rumors of wars, that's the end of times. But if you really stop and kind of think about what Jesus is saying, name a generation that hasn't had wars and rumors of wars.
Yeah.
Right. Name a generation that hasn't had a famine at some point in time. Right. Like if you walk through it, how many? Literally just a couple of weeks ago, we had some boneheaded guys that are like, "Oh, the end is here, and we're predicting it, and it's going to be this day," and that kind of a deal.
Yeah.
Every generation has those people.
Yeah.
Every one of them. And so if you look at all these things, these are really pretty generic signs. And so if Jesus is trying to lay out an end time, scenario here, I hate to put it this way, but Jesus isn't doing a very good job in that, because could be any generation for the last 2,000 years could have said, oh, I'm pointing right to it, kind of a thing. But here's what Jesus also says. He's like, you're going to hear these things. You're going to see these things. This isn't the end.
See that no one leads you astray.
Right.
Meaning when the internet tells you the end is coming because of this war or because of this famine, Jesus has already warned you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't let them lead you astray.
And I think some people start looking at it and they're like, oh, this is the end, kind of. Jesus literally just said it's not, However, that being said, if you take this as Jesus is leading up to something that's in the very near future, well, this makes a little more sense for him to actually mention it. We could
now he's answering the question, when will these things be? Meaning, when will the temple be destroyed?
That's what I would say. Yes, absolutely. So now let's move on to verses 9 through 14. These are more signs, but it's kind of getting a little more intense.
Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come.
Okay, so this is fun, right? Like, you look at this, you're like, well, clearly this is like the end of time, right? We're talking about the gospel being preached in the whole world, and then the end will come, and all these things. But let's kind of break it apart and let's look at it. The first portion, the first thing I want to point out is the word "then." All throughout this first section of this passage, you're going to see very time-oriented words, and those are really important. Those are indicators. I don't think they would be put there unless there was like a chronology of what was taking place, right? Then this will happen. Immediately after that, this will happen. The then is important because it gives us he's laying out a timeline. Jesus knows in his head a sequence of events that he is sharing with the disciples, and he's answering their question. So first, when you hear these things, that's not it. So again, our principle, pay attention to how he's using the words because they have an impact on the meaning of the text. I want to focus on the word "then you will be handed over." He's not talking about some future group of people. He's talking to the disciples. And of course, there's things we can pull from this, but we got to remember the context that he's talking to his disciples. And he looks at them and he says, "You will be handed over." And of course, we know the history. Most of them are, in fact, handed over, and most of them do, in fact, die for their faith. You will be handed over and persecuted and put to death. And in verse 10, we see another time indicator. At that time, so same time, many will turn away from the faith, they will betray and hate each other. We know that when persecution kicks up, you're going to have one or two things happen, right? You're either going to have people that just stand firm and get killed for their faith, or you're going to have people that are say, sayonara, I'm out, and that most certainly happened during the early church during those times. Talking about many false prophets appearing and deceiving people. We know of all that takes place. There'll be an increase in wickedness, and because of that, the love of many will grow cold. So get more and more intense, being very specific. And then it says the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. Again, you got the word end here. And so same word, but what is meant here? We just saw that Jesus predicted that some of them would be killed for their faith. So it's not that type of safety, right? He's not saying, well, if you stand firm to the end, you won't get killed. That's not what he's saying there. If you stand firm to the end of this time period of what's going on at this time, then you're going to be saved. That type of deal. I think the general idea here is ultimately they're going to be saved eternally. I think is what makes the most logical sense, because clearly he just said that some of them would die for their faith. But again, the end, how can the disciples, if he's talking to them, stand firm to the end of time? They're not going to be here, for that. This is a period of time that they're walking through where things are going to get really bad, ultimately leading up to the destruction of the temple and the Jewish people and all of those things. And he's like, stand firm for your faith. Continue to trust in me. Continue to believe in me, even when things get hard. And then there's an interesting phrase. It says, and this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. So what does that mean? And I don't know about you guys, but what I grew up hearing about this passage is, well, Jesus can't come back and the world can't end until every person on the earth at least hears the gospel, right? Did y'all have a similar thought?
Yeah,
we got to go everywhere.
Jesus can't come back.
Then Jesus can come back.
Yeah. It was almost presented as he wants to right now.
Yeah.
But y'all haven't done this part yet.
We're holding him back,
Yeah.
from returning. This kind of thing. So what does he really mean by that? And I think this brings up another another hermeneutics principle. I know I'm double dipping here.
Please.
But this one really comes down to genre. And
I'll say when it comes to chips and salsa, don't double dip. But when it comes to teaching us hermeneutics principles,
Okay, I disagree with this because it's contextual. If you are in the context of eating chips and salsa by yourself, double dip all you want.
Double dip. Yeah.
Completely fine. You're in the context of other people. I'm in the context of me and my wife are eating. I'll double dip.
I totally thought Sean was about to lay down some great biblical nugget when he said, well, this is contextual.
Sure it is.
Is it ever acceptable that you're double dipping from the salsa to the queso, so you got a little bit of salsa in the queso?
Absolutely.
I like it.
Yeah.
This is
That's why at the Mexican restaurant you get your own bowl.
Yeah.
And then you don't share it.
Yeah. So they started doing the
only
your
good
own
thing to come out of COVID.
Yeah, it was great. But one thing I'll do, and this is I think really applies to the text. One thing I'll do is I'll dip, I'll eat, I'll turn the chip around.
Oh yeah, that's a good strategy.
It has not been dipped at all, and I'll dip it in.
So then we're getting your finger juices instead of your mouth juices.
Perfect. Yeah, I do wash my hands. I just want to be clear.
You don't wash your mouth?
No, do not wash my mouth.
Did your mom has she ever washed out your mouth?
Well, brushing your teeth is washing your mouth.
That's true.
Yeah, and I use mouthwash.
That's true.
Yeah,
okay. That's a good call. All right. So this phrase is obviously interesting. All salsa dipping aside. So what does he mean here? Does it mean that the gospel literally has to be preached to every single person on the globe before the end? Then the end will come. And if he's talking about the end of an era or of an age, not the end of the world, well, then how does that play in, right? Because that's also kind of an important factor there. Or is this kind of a matter of using a phrase to show the lengths to which the gospel will go, kind of a deal? And this really comes down to genre, to the hermeneutics principle related to genre, understanding the genre of the text. And what you're about to see is everything that Jesus has already answered them, and most certainly everything that comes after this, is very prophetic-oriented literature. And if you look in the Old Testament at the genre of prophecy, you likely know that prophets use pretty flowery language to say certain things.
Trying to catch people's attention.
Yeah, it's meant to shock and awe. So when they say oh yeah, y'all gonna get taken over by an army. They may Joel talks about the locusts are coming in and darkening the sky, and it's just very flamboyant, very very out there. It's dramatic. It's made to really catch your attention. And we'll see a lot of that language in the rest of this passage. In fact, a lot of it is direct quotes from the Old Testament and pulling from Old Testament prophecy to answer this question. And so I think when Jesus says something like the gospel will be preached to the ends, of the earth, I don't necessarily think here that he's talking about every single person, has got to hear this kind of a deal. The known world at the time was most certainly the Roman Empire, and so what he's saying is the gospel is going to go all over the world. It's going out there even before the end of this age. And I'll tell you why I think that makes more sense is because if we're talking about the end of an age, not the end of the world, the end of the age when the Jewish temple goes away. This was God's primary way to show the world who he was through the Jews. All right. But that's changing now. The primary way that God's going to show himself to the world is through his son, through Jesus, who then is going to show himself through his church and through the power of the Holy Spirit working through his church. And so, but before the temple goes away, there's almost a replacement of how God is going to operate in the world, this new era, this new age, if you will, that is the church rather than the actual nation of Israel there. And so what he's saying is that, look, new era is coming, new age is coming, and the gospel is going to go all over the world, and then this end is going to come. The end of this temple, the end of his people.
So if I'm jumping ahead, then stop me. But what you're saying is the end of the age is the destruction of the temple. Like that's the clear cutoff, and that's the clear transition of there's no confusing the thought that we are still in the previous age. And so is that what he's answering both those questions? The end of the age will be when the temple is destroyed.
I think those are very closely tied together. I think it makes the most sense if you consider all of the rest of the passage. I really do. And of course, there's going to be folks that disagree with me on that, 100%. There's folks within my church that'll disagree with me on that.
Okay, so that this will be an interesting thing to work through. They made the assumption that the destruction of the temple was the end of the age, but they're meaning that in a different way than Jesus is meaning it. Yeah. So they were right that the destruction of the temple was the end of the age, but they were wrong about what the end of the age meant.
Yeah, and Jesus clarifies that for them later on when he talks about the parousia, or the coming, his coming. He sets that apart as a separate thing towards the end of this chapter. That's a good clarifying question. Anything else as of now before we keep rocking?
No, I'm good. Let's keep moving.
Okay.
I got it so far.
All right, game on. So let's look then at verses 9 through 14.
Actually, I do have a question.
Okay, go for it.
If you break the chip before you dip,
then you can dip twice.
Yeah, is that double dip? It's the same chip, but you have broken it in two.
Clearly not.
Does it
double
become
dipping.
two different chips?
I think most of us are worried about swapping spit. That's the primary concern.
Yeah.
Is
Okay,
that your
so
saliva is now in the salsa.
Okay, so flipping the chip around, you take a bite, you flip it around so that the part that has not been bitten goes in. Completely fine because it's not saliva.
I think that's most people's primary concern.
I think that's gray area, though, because I think some people might be worried that your lips got a little too close to the other side of that chip. Whereas if you break it apart beforehand,
would we have to examine how large the chip is?
Yeah, it depends.
I think so.
Did you get a shard of a chip to begin with?
How far is too far on the chip?
How much of a buffer zone do we need from your lips to the clean part of the chip?
Yeah.
Does the contamination go a quarter of an inch?
That's the question. That's the question, Jason. I'm hoping that you're going to answer with this.
We're going to try.
Yeah. Where is the end of the contamination zone?
Yeah.
The end has come to the contamination zone.
As long as the end of the age of chips and salsa has not come, I don't care. Honestly, I'm good.
But when did that age begin is the question.
But if you're unclear of where the end of the contamination zone is, that could result in the destruction of your friendship.
Mm-hmm. It could. I'm just happy to be in the age of chips and salsa.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is certainly an application.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves, but
I think that's good interpretation is what I'm getting at.
Just as the temple was destroyed.
Right. Read the next passage, knuckleheads. I love it.
So when you see standing in the holy place, the abomination that causes desolation, spoken of through the prophet Daniel, let the reader understand. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let no one on the housetop go down to take anything out of the house. Let no one in the field go back to get their cloak. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. Pray that your flight will not take place in winter or on the Sabbath, for then there will be great distress unequaled from the beginning of the world until now, and never to be equaled again.
Okay. Wow. That definitely sounds like the end of the world, right? Like, unequaled, never kind of a thing. So let's dig into this portion. He says, so when you see, all right, again, we have a time word, when you see the abomination that causes desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, flee, get out of there, basically, is what he's saying. What in the tarnation is an abomination that causes desolation? Is that when people like spit in your salsa or something?
Yeah,
like
what double dipping.
That is an abomination.
That causes desolation.
You have desolated my salsa. You abomination.
Absolutely. You are the abomination because you caused the desolation.
Yeah.
So are you asking what the reference is actually to?
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah,
the historical reference.
well, I'm just what exactly is he talking? Somebody who's just casually reading this is like, what does he even mean by that?
Without the historical context, this is a very strange
Yeah,
phrase.
it's so strange. Yeah,
It's Daniel 9:27.
yeah. So actually, do you have it open?
Yeah.
Read 25 through 27 if you could.
No one understand this from the issuing of the decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until an anointed one, the ruler, will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. That is a very odd way to talk about time, in my opinion.
Yes, it is.
It will be rebuilt with a plaza and a moat, but in difficult times. After those 62 weeks, the anointed one will be cut off and will have nothing. The people of the coming ruler will destroy the city and the sanctuary. The end will come with a flood, and until the end there will be war. Desolations are decreed. He will make a firm covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and offering, and the abomination of desolation will be on a wing of the temple until the decreed destruction is poured out on the desolator.
Wow. Okay.
Well, there you go. That clears that up.
That clears it up
Okay.
perfectly.
Okay. The Desolator. What an awesome metal band name.
Yeah. Or a wrestler. WWE or
Desolator. John Cena, the Desolator.
I feel like they really missed a boat on that. That would have been
missed opportunity.
That
for
would have
sure.
had to be in the 90s, like 80s or 90s, though. I feel like that would have been perfect time for that. So I wish I could spend like an hour on that just alone.
Just the Daniel passage.
But obviously we can't. So suffice it to say that in 70 AD, the Romans invaded Jerusalem to put down a revolt that was taking place. And as the temple was set ablaze during that time, the Romans set up pagan idols in the temple and sacrificed to their own gods there. This is like a really big deal. Even the Jews didn't go in the temple. Only the priests could go. And then in the Holy of Holies, only the high priest could go. This was like the holy place. Like nobody stepped foot in there unless you were ceremonially clean, all these things.
Am I remembering correctly that they even sacrificed pigs? Was that correct? Or was that Antiochus Epiphanes in...
I thought that's what happened.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Like a double insult.
I would have to go back and clarify 100%. But
it's one of the two, right?
Yeah. I think he's right on the Antiochus. That time the temple was
So
destroyed.
that's 586, is that right, BC?
Yeah,
so do you believe that this is in reference to that as well? Or only in reference to 70 AD?
Jesus is borrowing Daniel's basically what he is prophesied, which most certainly and he's applying it to what's about to happen. I mean that's clear to see what's happening here.
So would you say that Daniel, and I don't know that we've given enough context for people to understand our conversation right now.
You're probably right.
Okay, Daniel prophesied, I would say, about Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a Greek ruler who came and destroyed Solomon's temple in 586 BC and entered into the temple, and I would say, and made sacrifices there. And I would say that was Daniel's prophecy about the abomination of desolation.
Yeah.
And then so Jesus picks up on that and says, basically, it's going to happen again.
Yeah, yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. Yeah, because Jesus is talking to his disciples who are all Jewish. They would have known the story very well. And Jesus is basically pulling that story and saying, that this is what's about to happen. And this ultimately ended Jewish sacrifices. I don't know that there's been Jewish sacrifice since that time, or if there was, it wasn't in the way God wanted it to be at the temple, for sure. When Jesus is saying this, he's saying, when you see this stuff happening, get out of there. The siege of Jerusalem lasted 4 months, was incredibly brutal.
Some graphic stories from it.
Horribly graphic, that kind of a thing. And then he makes this statement. He says, at that time, there'll be great distress, unequaled from the beginning of the world until now and never equaled again. Now, that sounds like, man, this has got to be the tribulation at the end of times, right? This has got to be something big like that. But I want to come back to that genre.
Or it's prophetic literature.
Right? Yeah, I want to come back to that genre thing, because there's actually 4 other times in the Bible that this same phrase is used, and it's all in prophetic language. In fact, one of them is in Ezekiel 5:9, and it uses the exact same phrase, but it's actually referring to the destruction of Babylon coming in and destroying Israel at the time. And so while some of these most certainly point to a future day, end of time kind of a scenario, I think we got to recognize, in our American modern mindset, we're like, well, he said this is, it should happen this way. But what he's pointing out is like, this is going to be terrible. This is going to be horrible.
So here's a modern parallel that I've heard to explain the drama of prophetic literature. If you're talking about a football game or a soccer game or whatever, and you said, how'd it go? Did your team won? And you said, yeah, we won, versus, oh, we slaughtered them.
Yeah.
Like you're communicating 2 different things, and
Did your team won?
Did I say one?
You did.
You hear that?
You did.
It would have been a really insightful teaching there if I knew how to talk.
Yeah.
Did your team win?
Okay,
And you
now I
answered,
understand.
yes, we won. Versus, did your team win? We slaughtered them.
Yeah.
You're communicating a heightened level of winning.
Not only did you win,
right,
but it was you won by a lot.
Yeah. And so in prophetic literature, when they say, oh, it's the worst thing that's ever happened, then they're just saying, take this seriously. It's going to be really
This is
bad.
going to be brutal. Yeah.
And to over literalize what they're saying is to not be fair with the genre.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Because to over literalize when Sean said we slaughtered them would be then to arrest him, and to take him to jail for slaughtering a soccer team.
or a football team. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly kind of what's taking place here with this passage. So we've gotten to this place. We are clearly seeing, this is clearly the destruction of the temple, and it happens in very short order after the life of Jesus, just 40 or so years later. Most certainly during the life of these disciples is when all this is taking place. And he's giving prophetic language to let them know, like, hey, this is going down, kind of a deal. We still don't see a parousia yet. We still don't see that.
So it's the destruction of the temple. It's the end of the age, but it's not
yet
the sign of his second coming.
Correct. Yeah, we haven't seen that yet in the text. So let's carry on, verse 22 through 28.
If those days had not been cut short, no one would survive, but for the sake of the elect, those days will be shortened. At that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, or there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. See, I have told you ahead of time. So if anyone tells you, there he is out in the wilderness, do not go out, or here he is in the inner rooms, do not believe it. For as lightning that comes from the east is visible even in the west, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather.
Okay. All right. So did you hear the coming? Did you hear it?
I did, yeah.
First time
question
that he uses
two.
The actual word. Well, actually not yet, because he's basically saying, you're going to see all these things. That's not yet the coming. That's pretty much what he...
But he is saying... Don't be deceived. Don't believe these stories about, the Messiah is back. Because
that's not it.
When it does happen, it will be very obvious.
Yeah, absolutely. Like lightning.
It's not going to sneak up on you.
No, not your. Everybody's going to know what's going on. But that points to an important point here, is that if we were to argue that everything before this was end of time stuff, basically what Jesus is saying right here is this is after the destruction of the temple even, and all these, abomination, desolation, all these things. He's still saying that, but that's not the coming yet. Yeah, the coming is going to be seen. It's going to be very obvious. It's going to be very clear, but we're still not there yet,
Someone could have easily mistaken the destruction of the temple as the sign of Christ's second coming.
Oh,
and he's
100%.
saying, don't be confused.
Yeah.
When the temple is destroyed, that's not me coming again.
That's not it yet. That's not it. And look at what he says here. Another chronological reference. At that time, he says messiahs will appear, claiming a whole lot of things. They're even some of them be able to perform some signs and wonders to deceive people. And then he turns back to his disciples and says, "See, I have told you ahead of time." So still talking to them, still talking to the disciples here. He's not talking to anybody else. I've let you know this is coming. And so if anybody says, "Go out into the wilderness," because the Messiah is out there, don't go. Don't be an idiot. That if anybody says he's in an inner room, don't play into those games. That's not me coming back.
Meaning all this information he's just given you must be useful information for the people sitting at his feet at this moment.
Yes, absolutely.
Which would be confirming a preterist view. This is a prophecy about something that is happening imminently as opposed to something that is happening thousands of years later.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we see the second time that the word parousia is used. He says that the coming, or the parousia, of the Son of Man will be like lightning that comes from the east and is visible in the west. What he's saying is that it's going to be so visible that every eye is going to see it. And we see that backed up in other scriptures that talk about it, that actually talk about the second coming. Then we got verses 29 through 31. And this is getting real serious right here. So let's check this out.
Immediately after the distress of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory.
Okay. Was that through 31?
Nope. And he will send... I just took a pause. I took a pause, all right? And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the other.
Okay, so this has got to be it, right? Like this is literally, it says the coming of the Son of Man, right? Like this is the moment, right? Mm-hmm. Well, let's look and see. All right, there's some interesting things here that I think need to be considered. Immediately, again, we have another time reference, and this one's a pretty urgent one. Like immediately is like at the same time, like it's happening at the same time.
Yeah, shortly.
Yeah, this
after
isn't
the
just
destruction of the temple.
Yeah, this isn't just a next. This is like a right here. This is when it's going down.
Yeah, the distress of those days, talking about the siege, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so whatever he's about to say is directly tied to the destruction of the temple, like right there with it. And so he said, and then it's this crazy like quote. He's mentioning references from the Old Testament. The sun will be darkened, the moon will give up his light. If you're taking this at face value, yeah, this sounds like world-ending event. If the stars don't shine no more, we got issues, right? That's a really big deal. But notice that these are in y'all's translation. Do y'all have these in quotes? Is this?
Well, I'm reading from the NIV for you.
Yeah.
I've got it in quotes.
It is in quotes. All right. So this is actually this first part of it for sure. And all these are quotes or references to the Old Testament. But the two references that are most in line with this one are Isaiah 13:10 and Isaiah 34:4. Isaiah 13:10 says, "The stars of heaven and their constellations will not show their light. The rising sun will be darkened and the moon will not give his light." So almost verbatim the same thing. And then Isaiah 34:4 says, "All the stars in the sky will be dissolved, and the heavens rolled up like a scroll. All the starry hosts will fall like withered leaves from the vine, like shriveled figs from the fig tree." This language in Isaiah is being used to describe, in his case, the judgment and destruction of two ancient nations. One of them is a reference to Babylon being destroyed, and one of them is a reference to Edom being destroyed. Now, when Babylon was destroyed, I'm still looking up in the sky and I'm still seeing stars, right?
Sure.
Same thing with the reference with Edom. And so did Isaiah literally mean that the stars were going to fall from the sky and that the sky was going to be darkened and that kind of stuff? No, again, this goes back to our prophetic genre.
A lot of times stars are references to rulers.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know many use this and say, well, of course, that means God is describing final judgment on the whole world. But that meaning is not necessary here. This wording is being used to describe judgment in general. God's judgment on Babylon, God's judgment on Edom. But there's another nation that God is judging in our current Matthew chapter 24 passage. And I think we gloss over this a lot. But God has major issues right now with Israel. Major issues to allow the destruction of the temple to take place and all these things that are happening here. God just brought them the Messiah that they had been waiting for hundreds and hundreds of years, that he came and preached to them. He did miracles. He, all these things. And we look at Paul, obviously we look at the Gospels, but we look at Paul and they just flat out reject him.
Yeah,
they
say, give us more miracles, prove it more.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Or you're not the kind of Messiah we want.
Yeah,
we pictured something different. Be the Messiah that we want.
Exactly.
And his answer was no. And they said, okay, well then we'll kill you.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So they literally killed the Son of God. I mean, that's a pretty big. That's a pretty big move to make, right? God's people, who should be the one the Messiah is coming through, should be welcomed and received by him, should be Hosanna in the highest.
Right.
But a few days later, it's like, crucify him, all right?
Yeah.
And so, I think we need to not understate the idea that God is judging his people, Israel. And then, of course, the question is, if God's using that to...
I just want to point out, my water bottle just ran out because it's too small.
This is the problem. Yeah,
it's too small of a water bottle.
Yep.
If I'd had the larger one, I'd be good.
I mean, I'll say this: if you want to pull out the larger water bottle, Shan,
I'd actually be in favor of it.
I think
it's empty. I didn't think. I actually thought it was too much water.
Come on. I feel like now, just for fun, for every episode, we're gonna need that large water bottle.
If we could just put it right on the table.
Well, I tried.
I
tried the smaller water bottle. I gave it my best shot. The big boy's got to come back.
You can play hide and go seek behind that, Sean.
It completely blends in with my beard and my shirt.
We wouldn't even know it was there. See, that's not obtrusive at all.
That's great.
So I'm just gonna say, Meg, I tried the small water bottle. The big guy's got to come back.
It's just not working out. It's not working out. Yeah. So back to the text, if the structure of Israel being God's people, if that is coming to a close, the temple is being destroyed, Israel as a nation at this point is effectively dissolved after this, what then is going to fill it? And I think this is the whole idea of the end of an age and the start of something different. And that's kind of answered in this next part. We see the sign, what will appear is the sign of the Son of Man in heaven. And then all the peoples of the earth will mourn as they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call. This is like it right here. Like, if you don't think this is the end of times, how can you argue against that, right? I mean, this is pretty straightforward. Now, notice it says then, again, another time reference. We're still in the story. They're still marching us through the story along the way. And many see it that way, but a major problem exists with that. If this is still walking through this story and this is the return of Christ, how does Jesus in the very next paragraph say all these things are going to happen before the end of this generation passes away?
It would seem to be connected to the phrase immediately.
He's walking through. It's right there, happening all at the same time. And so we got to figure out this, what is the sign of the Son of Man? That's an interesting phrase. And so this is clearly a reference to Daniel chapter 7. And he walks through a vision in Daniel 7 that Daniel receives. But in the midst of that vision, Daniel, starting in verse 13 of chapter 7 of the book of Daniel, says that in my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like a son of man, coming with the clouds of heaven. And he approached, look at what he does in his coming. He approached the Ancient of Days and was led into his presence. And he was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All nations and peoples of every language worshiped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. So Daniel was looking ahead to a new age, a new era in which the Son of Man, a man-like figure, will come, but he doesn't actually come down to earth in this passage. He comes to the throne of God. and then from God receives authority and power and glory and all of these things. And then he rules over the whole world in this situation. This is a text about enthronement. This is a text about the power being received. Now, let's look at some of the things that Jesus said. I think this is important. Jesus said, what about his kingdom? My kingdom is not of this world. If so, my disciples would take up swords and fight, right? Jesus said, I've received all power and authority from the Father. Boy, that's a big statement to make, because if he would have told that to anybody, any Jew, they would have immediately referenced back to, well, that's us. I mean, he even called himself, some of the gospel call him Son of Man over and over and over again, so clearly that's the connection that's there. And then of course, Jesus empowers his disciples. All power in heaven and on earth has been given to me, therefore go and make disciples of all nations, that kind of deal. So we see Jesus having all authority and all power, and him claiming that while he's on earth. But we don't see Jesus claiming a throne on earth. We see him gaining all authority and power from heaven, from the Father. And then we see his kingdom being not one of flesh and bone, but one of spirit that takes over the world, that rules, that conquers, all these, powers of darkness and all these kinds of things. And so this sign of the Son of Man, now we talk about whether that's is there like an actual, did somebody go to Staples and make a sign and throw it in the air? Is that the kind of sign that we're talking about? Is there, is it like lightning, or is it some kind of star with Bethlehem and, Christmas and that kind of a thing? What exactly is he talking about? We could dive into all of that. But ultimately what we see here in Daniel 7 is a Son of Man figure gaining authority and power to rule over the whole earth. That's kind of what's happening here. So before, God operated through Israel, through his people, to bring his word to the world. But now God is operating through his Son, is ruling and reigning over the world. And he's doing that. He's bringing his kingdom forward through his church and through his people. All right. So I think that's an interesting thing here, because, and here's the other part that's really fun. The second part that we need to recognize, the word parousia, right? That's a big one. I said it was going to be in the middle. I always
thought it was parousia.
Parousia? Well, maybe it is.
That how you? I don't know.
I'm definitely not gonna. Yeah, I'm not a Greek pronunciation expert.
If you're a Greek pronunciation expert out there in the airwaves, check us on this. There's going to be a seminary professor that gets on and totally lambasts us.
Both of you are wrong
for butchering the pronunciation of parousia or parousia, whichever one. That's the redneck version. Parousia. So there you go. But guess what word is not being used here? It's the word parousia. That's not the word that's being used for coming when it says that the Son of Man coming on the clouds. All right. The word that's being used is erkomenos or komenos. You can correct me on that if you have a better one. And it means to come or to go. It's a coming or a going kind of word. Now,
where is that? I'm sorry.
So when it says that you'll see the sign of the Son of Man coming on the clouds,
then all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven.
Yeah. So not parousia, not used, which is fascinating, right? Because this is the moment. Yeah. If this is the second coming of Christ, that would be the moment to use. Yeah. The word.
Why wouldn't he use the same term that he used earlier?
Because he's already made a point to use it to say, when these things happen, that's not the parousia. That's not the second coming of Christ.
Interesting.
But then here, when he says, you'll see the sign of the coming of the Son of Man, he doesn't use that word. Really, really interesting. Of course, go ahead.
So, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here. Maybe you're not finished explaining. But what's being described here then in 29 through 31?
So let's get into that. So if you see it that way, it actually makes sense. The idea of borrowing from Daniel 7 is that the Son of Man is coming or going to receive the power from the Father, to receive power from God.
Enthronement in heaven. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what's being said here.
So does that necessitate that Jesus was not truly enthroned in heaven until the destruction of the temple in 70 AD?
I wouldn't say that.
Is that being overly literal with what's going on in this text, or?
I think so. Let's kind of walk through it. So in light of the destruction of the temple, this is a moment when all of Jesus's claims, everything that he said, I'm the Son of God, I'm the Son of Man, all of the, I'm going to rise again, I'm going to power, all these things. And then he's prophesied, right, that the temple is going to be destroyed and all these things. This is the moment where all of that comes together. The whole culmination of all that.
A final confirmation.
Yeah, absolutely. It is definitely that. And it's almost like all the Jews were basically saying, you're not the Son of God. You're not the Messiah. And then Jesus is like, okay, but that temple is going to be destroyed and the church is going to go forward and the power is going to spread, the gospel is going to spread throughout the whole earth. And then it finally happens. And it's like Jesus is effectively like, told you so.
And by 70 AD, the Christian movement has exploded.
Oh yeah,
and the true temple of God is being added to stone by stone, being built up.
Absolutely.
Right. Whereas the old, no longer effective, active temple is being destroyed.
Yeah. So it's not so much that Jesus has waited to this point to get authority. It's that they're finally seeing the sign of that authority coming.
For those who refuse to believe, those who continued to participate in the temple, this is it. The Son of Man coming on clouds is because the temple is being destroyed?
Yeah, the temple's being destroyed and the church, the power of God through the church is moving forward. I think those two things are coming together and they're seeing it. I mean, it's just like, it's blatantly obvious. But the word here for earth in the Greek has a range of meaning. One of those meanings is land or area, of land, that kind of word. And it's the word phyla, and it always refers to, in the Septuagint, it always refers to like the tribes of Israel, like their specific tribes, every single time. So if you viewed it in that way, it's a reference to basically all the tribes of Israel will mourn, kind of a deal. And why? Why would that be the case? Well, because obviously the temples got destroyed. That's one reason to mourn.
They've rejected the
But
Messiah.
they've rejected that. They realize at that point that they've rejected the Messiah. And it's also important here to say that, notice he says, you will see the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, right? Why doesn't he just say, you'll see the Son of Man coming down, right?
Yeah, that's true. Because earlier when he said,
sign,
when the Messiah comes, it will clearly be seen.
He's coming and saying, you're gonna have the sign of the Son of Man coming. Well, the Son of Man coming was him receiving power and authority from above, and you're going to see that displayed. Sure. And so the third thing we're going to kind of dive into in this part of the passage is, well, what about that last phrase? And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the four winds, from one end of the heavens to the others. So this is also, surprise, surprise, Old Testament references that he's laying out here. One is in Deuteronomy 30, verse 4, and other passages also that speak of God gathering his people back. We see a reference to Isaiah 27:13 when he says, and in that day a great trumpet will sound, and those who are perishing in Assyria and those who are exiled in Egypt will come and worship the Lord on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. And so we see this language that's being used in the Old Testament. And I think this is more of a reference to the gospel going forward, the gospel going out,
advancement of the gospel,
and them being brought into his kingdom, them being brought into his presence, so to speak. And I think the use of obviously angels here, this could be just a reference to any messenger that goes out. But I think in this context, he's most certainly talking about actual angels. And I think the reason he's talking about that is he's talking about the divine power that's going forward into the world to bring in those who are lost without Christ, those who are going to trust him in faith, and to bring them into his kingdom, wherever they are. Doesn't matter if they're Jews, doesn't matter if they're Gentiles, doesn't matter if they're here or if they're way halfway around the world. That message is going to go forward and those people are going to be brought in.
But would that necessitate that before we share the gospel, we should play some trumpet music?
Some ska. How about some ska, bro? Like you could rock some ska music.
Yeah,
and, have the trumpets in there.
That's why he sends us out 2 by 2. One person to play the trumpet and one person to share the gospel.
Boom.
Sneak up behind people, and then hear ye, hear ye. The Lord Christ has come to you in this moment with
a herald,
good, great gospel.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that could be the reference, that kind of what we're talking about here. So verse 32 through 35 kind of give us a summary of everything that we've just read. So share that real quick.
Now learn this lesson from the fig tree. As soon as its twigs get tender and its leaves come out, you know that summer is near. Even so, when you see all these things, you know that it is near, right at the door. Truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will never pass away.
That's pretty emphatic. Jesus said, this generation will certainly not pass away. I mean, that's about as straightforward as you're going to get. And so you got to wrestle with that. So Jesus is kind of bringing in all the thoughts together here. Verse 32 and 33, he's just using a proverb. He's saying that when these things start happening, you'll know they're on their way, just like when you see leaves on a fig tree, you know that summer's on the way. Okay, that's just pretty straightforward illustration that they would have understood. In the same way, when you start seeing all these things happen, you know that this changing of the guard, this end of the age is near, and that this new thing is coming. And so when he says, "Truly, I say to you," that means it's giving great emphasis, right? This is it. What he's about to say can be trusted. This generation will certainly not pass away till all these things, take place. And he's saying, guys, it's coming. Hang in there. Trust me. Got this.
One interesting historical tidbit here that I remember from studying the parallel passage in the book of Mark was, and I don't remember all the details now, but there's historical evidence that there were Christians who recognized the signs and fled from Jerusalem before the destruction of the temple and were physically, bodily saved because they knew Jesus' teachings on this subject, saw it coming, and fled in time.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
Which would lead credence to everything that we just said being in regard to the destruction of the temple.
Yeah, so the point being
and practical warnings, practical teachings for the immediate audience that he's talking to.
And they would have seen it that way. And so this kind of wraps up his first answer, when the temple would be destroyed, the inauguration of the new age, all those kind of things. And then Jesus makes a very clear shift here in verse 36. And it may not seem as big of a shift as it actually is because of the English portion, but there's some Greek things to know that really kind of lay emphasis to the fact that Jesus is now answering the other question. Okay, so give me do 36 through 42.
Okay. But about that day or hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. Is that Parousia?
Yes, there's your Parousia.
There we go. For in the days before the flood, people were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day Noah entered the ark. And they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That is how it will be at the coming of the Son of Man.
Yeah.
2 men will be in the field, one will be taken and the other left. 2 women will be grinding with a handmill, and one will be taken and the other left. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come.
Yeah, absolutely. And it goes on, but that's enough. So there is a very clear break that takes place between 35 and 36, and I'll give you a few reasons as to why. So first, the Greek phrase used in the beginning of 36 is peri day, and it means but about that day, nobody knows kind of thing. So this phrase is always used in the text, in every text in the Bible. When this phrase is used, it is always used to mark a change of subject or a new thought. Every single time. Paul uses it that way. Luke uses it that way. Matthew uses it that way. Actually, in this very book, he uses it that way a couple of other times. So when you see this phrase, ding, 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 we're shifting gears here. This is a little bit different. Something different is happening. Second important thing is the phrase that day or hour is the first time a particular day or hour is used in this whole passage. We've had tons of chronological words. Then this is going to happen. Immediately after that, blah, 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 blah. But this is the first time he says, but about that day or hour. He's being very specific. So third, up to now, Jesus speaks to events he was predicting, that he knew when they would come, at what time they would come, all of those things. He's been saying, well, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. I mean, he's just laying it out. He knows exactly what's about to take place. And like you said, people listened to him, and they actually got out because they listened to him, because he laid it out there exactly for them. But this is the first time Jesus just emphatically says, I don't know. You're asking me about the coming of the Son of Man, of the parousia of the Son. I don't know. Only the Father knows. That's crazy to think about. This is the Son of God here. And he's saying, man, I know all of these things, but I can't answer that question for you. The disciples are like, well, we want to know. We want to check it out. And so that's a pretty big statement. Fourth, up until now, the only time parousia has been used was to say that certain signs were not an indication of the parousia. But here we see it being used full out, for really the first time where he actually says something about when it's going to take place. Basically, he just says he doesn't know when it's going to take place. But I think it's fascinating that he's waited this long. That's the word that's used in their question. And now he's finally getting around to using that word to answer their question. They may not like the answer to the question, but he's saying, but about the coming, y'all asked about the coming. So I'm telling you about the coming. Yeah, we don't know the day or the hour of that. We don't know when that's going to take place. And I think that connection is really, really important there with that. And then the final thing that
so to connect to clarify between the coming, there was the different Greek word that was his enthronement in heaven, whereas his second coming would be his rule over all of
his physical coming, his presence.
So both
with us.
are a kind of enthronement. Both are kingdom concepts, but it's the fullness of his kingdom coming in this second.
I would say
parousia.
Spiritual enthronement versus literal physical presence with us type of enthronement.
Okay.
I mean, he's already enthroned at this point,
whether
we want him to be or not, it doesn't matter. He's God.
Sure, but to be physically present.
Yeah, I think that's a very different concept altogether. And then the fifth reason that this is a clear break is all the time words go away. We don't see any of those anymore. That all is eliminated. Up to now, every new portion was introduced by a then or immediately afterwards or in those days. But here we see a specific of that day and hour, but then there's nothing else. And what he says of that day and hour is, I don't know, So all those show us that this is a very different thing that he's talking about. It's separated from the previous events that have been taking place. There's a transition here. So about the temple and the changing of the age, Jesus gives them every little detail, every little thing that they want to know. But when it comes down to the Father sending his Son back to earth, he gives them nothing, because he doesn't know himself, or is what he says here. And but when it does come, what he's saying is that it's going to be unexpected. You're not gonna. There's not. Basically, he's saying, here's all the signs for this first set of things, but now I'm telling you that when the Son of Man comes back to the earth, you're not going to know that it's coming. Which is that further gives credence that he's talking about two different things, right?
Yeah.
Because if he's still giving out signs, well, he would say, well, but it'll be getting close when this happens, or it'll be getting close when that happens.
Sure.
But he's saying, but no, there's no sign. I can't give you any signs.
It would
I can't give you anything.
Contradictory for me to give you signs if I don't know what
exactly.
it is.
It's going to be completely, which further gives credence to the fact that if all these things are about the end, and Jesus has literally just laid them out a blow by blow by blow play of what's going to happen. If that is about the end,
contradict,
then why would he then say
the second teaching?
It's going to be a total surprise?
Yeah,
that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
and so that's how it's coming is going to be. It's going to be, people are going to be marrying and giving away in marriage and eating and drinking and doing all the things, and then just like in the days of the flood, it's just going to come. And they're not going to know. And if you're not ready, if you're not already on guard, if you're not already seeking the Lord and doing what He's asking you to do, and then asking you to be doing, then it's not going to be good. So I think for all those reasons, I think this gives a good answer to the fact of, is Jesus a false prophet? I don't believe so. I think Jesus is talking about two different things. He's answering the two different questions that's taking place. And one of those, he has every little detail about what's going to take place. And then the other one, he has no detail because he doesn't know when that's going to take place. And we don't know when it's going to take place. And then I think that leads us to some really good applications then for our lives, right? And I think that's the last part that we always want to kind of look into and address is, what does that mean then for us? I mean, we could give out 1,000 in this passage, but one of the things that I think is so important is I think we can rest assured that Jesus wasn't a false prophet. I think that's one.
Praise
for
the
me.
Lord.
Like, Okay, breathe a sigh of relief there. We can trust in what Jesus has to say. And
We have spent our lives in a very foolish way
most certainly.
if Jesus is the false prophet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's so important for people, because sometimes when you do read scripture and things happen in your life, doubts can easily come into people's lives. And it'd be very easy to look at a passage like this and say, well, maybe Jesus isn't trustworthy. Maybe he was going against what God said, or all these things. But when you dig down and you see how these words are connecting and what Jesus is actually talking about, and for me that gives confidence, as I look at God's word, that like, okay, I can trust then in what what Jesus is saying here. Another application for me was that and just a joy to know that Christ rules and reigns over his kingdom. That's now. That new age of his ruling and his enthronement is today. His kingdom is here, but still to come in fullness later, like kind of what you said. And it will never end, either in this world or the next. He has been enthroned. I love the passage in Acts where Stephen says, I see him standing at the right hand of the Father as he's being stoned, and we see the power at the right hand of the Father. The church goes forward by his power and by his authority. And we are a part of those who have been gathered in to that. We're a part of God's elect as those who have placed faith and trust in Christ. Praise the Lord for that. We get to be a part of a kingdom that is far bigger than our own. And then my last application, I want to give you guys open to like throw in some things and throw some barbs at me or whatever you want to do is totally fine. But what great hope that we can have in knowing that even though we don't know the day or the hour when Christ is going to return, that there is going to come a time where the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords is going to come. His parousia is going to take place. And he's going to come dwell with his people. I love the passage in Revelation where it says, behold, God's dwelling place is now with men. What an incredible thing. I'm going to go down and hang out with Jesus today. You know what I'm saying? Like how awesome is that? And what glory and what joy that will be. And until that day, we must stay vigilant. We must be found faithful. We must share the hope that we have. We're his church. We're his people. We're his children. So give me your feedback, guys. What do you got? What are some applications? We've kind of been wrestling through this and wrestling this bear of a text.
Well, the first obvious application is we need more trumpet players. Whenever we're going to present the gospel, we need somebody with a trumpet who can get people's attention and make it clear that we're speaking on behalf of the king.
I'm all about that.
There's
maybe
actually
some banners.
I'm trying to remember who it was. I think it was Whitfield that preached on the final trumpet blast or whatever.
George Whitfield would have been
he was an evangelist in the 1700s, and he traveled around America and in England and America, and he was preaching on the second coming of Christ, preaching on that final trumpet blast. And he had it arranged that he had a trumpet player behind the curtains. So the end of his sermon, the dude started playing, and George's sermon was basically, are you ready for the trumpet to sound? Are you ready for the trumpet to sound? Yeah. And then this guy starts playing the trumpet, and it caused a riot. People started losing their minds and because they thought Jesus was returning.
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. That's a good one right there. We
scare the devil out
of people. For real.
That'd be great. Oh man!
But for me, the immediate application comes to my mind is, it's here in the text. Therefore, keep watch.
Yeah,
we don't know when he's coming, and so the way I've always communicated it is, what do you want to be in the middle of doing when Jesus returns?
Yeah.
And that, as a Christian, that won't change your eternity. It's not like he caught you in the middle of sin, so you lose your salvation. But I believe it will certainly change the emotion of that moment. If you're caught in the middle of sharing the gospel when Jesus returns versus in the middle of sin when Jesus returns, I would imagine the feeling in that moment would be drastically different. Mm-hmm. And so that's a good principle to live your life on. He could come at any moment. What do I want to be in the middle of doing when the sky tears open and the trumpet sounds, and from horizon to horizon, it is clear to everyone in existence that the Lord has come?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like I might be caught at Walmart. That's what I feel, or in a carpool line. I feel like that's probably going to be the most likely situation.
Yeah.
So, we could be caught in this podcast if it goes any longer.
Yeah, you're right. Oh man.
Yeah. So the two kind of different questions that he's answering. One is he's like the ultimate answer to the first question is Jesus is on the throne right now, right? Yeah. The other one is Jesus is coming back here sometime.
Yeah, he's bringing his throne to us.
Yeah. And so be ready, be on guard, be watchful is applying that second one. Then applying the first one. That first answer is live like Jesus is on the throne right now, because he is. Yeah,
absolutely.
He if he's on the throne in heaven, he should be on the throne in your heart.
Yeah, absolutely, big time. Well, guys, any final passing remarks?
Pretty easy passage.
I mean, it's no she bears.
Here, in the Logos Bible app, it will pronounce this word, parousia.
It'll pronounce it.
Pronounce it.
We're gonna get it. He's gonna mess me up.
Parousia.
Parousia.
Apparently, you got to say it like a small Italian boy.
Parousia.
Parousia. You got to roll the R, and you got to go up at the end. Parousia.
All right. Well, I think that really clears it up, doesn't it?
Thank you for that. We really needed that at the end.
Mamma mia. It's the parousia.
Oh my goodness. Well, hopefully you are preparing yourself for the parousia.
Yep.
And are ready when he comes and being vigilant.
All right. That's Bears Boys Bible Study Fantastica, episode 2. Remind us of the hermeneutical principle.
The hermeneutical principle was number 5, right?
Number 5.
Not
5. You got to give it a letter too.
Oh,
remember?
5A?
Yeah, it's the first one. Sure.
5.1.
I know you chose B just to be weird, but
all right. So 5.1.
So 5A, and the principle is regarding the language of the text is how the Bible uses individual words has a major impact on the meaning of the text.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning, read slowly. Don't assume you know exactly how that word is being used. Yeah. Do some digging.
Do some study on those Greek or Hebrew words, depending on the passage, and dig into that.
Okay, so you have heard your rock xylophone.
Oh yeah,
your rock xylophone intro music. You approve of it? You're glad? You're happy with it? All right, Sean, you're next. So you get to give us the prompt for the AI music generator for your episode.
Okay. I would like it to be in the style of rockabilly. So
rockabilly.
Yeah, which is a blend of rock and kind of bluegrass.
Kind of a classic country rock fusion.
Yeah.
All right. I'll do it. It'll be good.
That'd be great.
It might not be good, actually. I can't make that promise, but it'll be something.
It will be.
All right, y'all. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for Bears Boys Bible Study Fantastica. We'll see you next time.